In today's video, we'll be looking at how to edit raw images non-destructively inside of Affinity. So before starting the editing, first of all, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please hit the subscribe button in order to get new tips and tricks related to Affinity. Now with that said, let's start our video. So first of all, we'll simply place our new image inside of Affinity, which is the raw image. And in order to place it, I'll simply navigate below and open our Finder window. And from the Finder window, I'll bring in this particular image by dragging and dropping, and then it will automatically place it inside of Affinity. So since this image is raw image, now Affinity has changed the user interface to develop mode. So inside the develop mode, you can see that we have several options for this output property. So in order to edit this particular raw images non-destructively, we can use the raw layer embedded option. However, let's understand the concept of what pixel layer option and raw layer linked option does. So if we select pixel layer option, a pixel layer option is kind of destructive based editing option, where if we make any changes to this raw image, then those changes could not be revised after we have commit the changes by selecting the develop button right here. So the next option that we have is raw layer embedded. So the raw layer embedded option simply embeds all of the information of the raw image to this particular raw image after we have made adjustments and clicked on develop inside of this UI. So basically, this particular option allows us to revise all those changes that we have applied, as well as make changes to the adjustments that we have applied in this particular raw image development UI. Likewise, we have third option, which is raw layer linked. So the raw layer linked option basically links this particular raw image that we have opened with the original raw image file in our Finder window. And if you are using Windows, then it will link your raw image to the image file in their Windows Explorer. So let's say if you accidentally delete or move your file after you have applied the adjustment to your raw images by selecting the raw layer linked option right here, then we have to bring back the image that we have moved or deleted in the same directory in order to work further. So now for the non-destructive editing of this particular image, I'll simply click on raw layer embedded. And the next thing about raw layer embedded option is that when adjusting or making any adjustments to the raw image while selecting the output value to raw layer embedded, it will drastically increase the size of the image after we have added more adjustments sequentially to this particular raw image. So now what I'll be doing is I'll simply navigating to the right and selecting the basics panel. And as you can see in this image, we have very high intensity of exposure. I'll simply decrease the exposure slider a bit. I'll increase the black point slider a bit in order to recover the details. And then I'll increase the brightness levels a bit to the right like so. And right now you can see that nothing has changed in the values of these properties. That's because of the issue that is persisting inside of the new version of Affinity. However, whenever we drag the slider, the overall effect can be seen inside of the raw image here. So the next thing that I'll be doing is I'll navigating above and selecting on the develop button right here in order to commit. So after committing, now you can see that all the adjustments that we have applied to this raw image is now visible inside of this raw image. So the next thing that we will be doing is let's add a new adjustment layer by navigating to the right and selecting this icon right here, and then navigating below and selecting HSL. And after selecting HSL, now let's add HSL adjustment layer to this particular raw image. So first of all, let's select the greens in the image, and we can select the greens by simply clicking on this green color option right here, and then we can shift the saturation shift slider like so in order to adjust the greenery like so. And now you can see that it is changing the saturation of the greens in the hills where there's the lighthouse. And likewise, we can also shift the hue a bit like so in order to change the overall tone of the grasses up on top of the hill. And then similarly, we can select the cyan color right here in this cyan option, a color option, and then adjust the saturation shift a bit like so in order to accentuate the color of the seas as well. And now after we are satisfied, let's close the HSL box in order to commit. So after closing the HSL box, the next thing that we'll be doing is we will simply again go to our develop image mode, or in order to see why selecting the output value of embedded makes our image non-destructive. So in order to go to the develop mode, I'll simply select the original raw image right here. We can either double click on this thumbnail in order to go to the development mode again, or we can simply navigate and select the move tool right here. And after selecting the move tool, we can simply navigate and select the develop button. After selecting the develop button, now you can see that we have all the adjustments intact as it was when we have initially applied all the adjustment. Now, if we change the slider value of the contrast further and change the clarity value and decrease the saturation like so, what it will do right now is it will take the HSL adjustment layer as well, which we have added in the Pixel Studio editing mode outside of this particular development mode. However, if we want to see these particular settings only been applied to the initial raw image that we have added, besides other layers such as the HSL layer that we have added secondly, then we can simply navigate to the top and select or uncheck the show all layers, and we can now only see how our original raw images that we have placed inside of this Affinity document is looking when we have made further adjustment inside of this develop UI inside the basics panel. So if we want to see the effect of other layers as well that we have added in the Pixel Studio editing mode, then we can simply check on the show all layers option again, and we can see now that our seas are getting much more bluish or cyanish, which we have applied to our HSL adjustment layer. Now after adding the newly enhanced adjustment sliders of contrast, clarity and saturation from the basics panel here, and simply navigate up and click on develop in order to commit. So now the newly added adjustments from our development UI will also be applied in this particular image. And our raw image is fully non-destructive. That is, we can again go back and change those sliders again in order to make adjustments to all those adjustments that we have applied from the development UI. Next, let's see how this particular non-destructive editing of raw image inside the development UI works when we have masked a particular raw image. Next, I'll navigate the cursor below and open the Finder window again. And from inside the Finder window, I'll simply right-click on this particular raw image, navigate below and select Open With and select Affinity by default. And now you can see that it has opened the raw image inside of Affinity and has opened the raw image development mode UI inside of Affinity. So in here as well, we can first of all make sure that our raw layer embedded option has been selected. And after selecting the raw layer embedded option, we can simply navigate to the basic panel on the right and then tweak the adjustment layers such as exposure to make the exposure of the image a little bit bright, adjust the black point slider as well a little bit, and then increase the brightness a bit like so in order to accentuate the highlights portion of this particular raw image. Next, we can also play around a little with contrast as well as a bit of clarity as well like so. And after adding those adjustments inside of this raw image, the next thing that we will be doing is simply navigating up and selecting the develop option in order to commit. Now after clicking on commit, we are now in the Pixel Studio mode. So inside of the Pixel Studio mode, what we will be doing here is let's select all the sky portion from this image. And in order to select all the sky portion from this image, I'll simply navigate to the left and click and hold on this particular object selection tool, which will open the myriads of other selection tools. And I'll simply navigate below and select Flood Select Tool. And after selecting the Flood Select Tool, I'll make sure that our mode is selected to add. And after making the mode to add in order to make multiple selections in different portions of the image, I'll simply click on the sky like so in order to make the selection. And in order to add further in this particular or from this particular portion of the image, I'll simply click here as well. And this has added that portion of the sky as well as part of the selection. However, there are a few issues here, such as these particular details of the building also needs to be opted out of the selection. However, before that, first of all, let's refine our selection. And in order to refine the selection, I'll navigate up and click on refine. So after clicking on refine, you can see that the masked out area from the image is highlighted with reds right here. And now let's refine the foliage edge, which is in this particular portion or area. So I'll simply click and brush over the edges of those areas. But before that, you can see that we have a very small round brush. So in order to increase the size of the brush, I'll simply click in this particular option and then drag the slider a bit like so, maybe somewhere at 320 pixels for now. And then next, I'll simply now brush over the edges of the foliage right here. Now after brushing, you can now see that it will fix the selection or refine the selection accordingly to the edges of the foliage. And after I'm satisfied, I'll simply navigate below and click on apply. So the next thing that we need to fix is we need to fix this particular building right here in order to opt it out of the selection. So in order to opt it out of the selection, I'll first of all use the shortcut key of Command and plus in order to zoom in. You can use the shortcut key of Control and plus if you are using Windows. So now I'll hold down the spacebar key in order to bring or invoke the hand tool and then pan around like so and fit in the view of the building that has been opted inside of the selection. So now in order to opt this building out of the selection, I'll simply navigate and select the selection brush tool right here and decrease the size of the brush by using the shortcut key of less curly bracket or less big bracket key from the keyboard. And now after I'm satisfied with the size of the brush, I'll simply paint over here like so. And before painting, also make sure that you have selected to the subtract mode right here. And now what it does is it will simply up that portion of the selection out from this building. So now it has fixed that, and there are a few areas to fix here as well. So overall, the selection is okay. So I'll now fit the view of the image to the screen by using the shortcut key of Command and 0 or Control plus 0 if you are using Windows. Now, let's mask out the selection from this image. So in order to mask it out, simply navigate to the right and click on this particular mask layer icon like so. And now it has masked the entire building instead of the sky. Use the shortcut key of Command D if you are using Mac and Control D if you are using Windows. Now let's select the Move tool and make sure that you have selected your mask from this particular raw image. And now let's invert our mask. So to invert our mask, I'll simply use the shortcut key of Command I. And if you are using Windows, you can use the shortcut key of Control I. Now you can see that our buildings are very much visible now and the sky has been masked out. So the next step now is to bring in the sky from external images. So to place and bring the new skies in this document, I'll simply navigate below and open the Finder window. And from the Finder window, I'll click and then drag this particular sky image like so inside of this canvas. And it has been successfully placed inside of canvas. Now I'll simply zoom out and then drag and resize the image of this particular sky image inside of our document like so, and then I'll place it by repositioning it somewhere to this particular position like so. And the next thing that I'll do is simply click and drag this sky layer beneath our raw image layer like so in order to add the sky. So we have successfully added the sky. And the next thing that we will be doing now is we're fixing the color tones of the building to match with that of the sky. And in order to do that, since our raw image is non-destructive, this time I'll go to the development UI again, not by selecting the develop button right here, but by simply double clicking on this particular thumbnail icon of the layer. So as soon as we double click on this particular thumbnail icon of that raw image layer, now it has navigated us to the develop UI. Now the next thing that we can do is we can simply go to the tones panel check the curves panel right here in order to activate it, and then navigate below and let's select blue. And after selecting blue, we can now introduce a bit of blue inside of the buildings to match the tone with that of the sky. So I can simply click on this point and drag it to the left like so. And now it is slowly starting to match with the tone of the sky. Furthermore, we can also navigate and select the master option right here. And after selecting the master option, we can simply add a new node and then adjust the contrast of the overall image of the building like so. So we can add much more highlights in these particular dark areas or shadowy areas, and in order to do that we can simply click on this point and drag it a bit up, and you can see that it has now retained back those details like so. And now after we are satisfied, the next thing that we can do is we can check what it has done when we have applied these adjustments inside the develop UI mode. So if you have noticed carefully, then all the adjustments through this curves option we have applied here is only applied to the raw images, not the sky layer. So if I uncheck this show all layer option, you can see here now that it only applies all of these changes inside of this particular building layer or the raw image layer inside of Pixel Studio. And it does not apply these adjustments settings inside of other layers such as the sky layer. So this is the other way of how this non-destructive editing of raw images work inside of Affinity. So if I check the show all layers again, and then you can see that if I change the contrast like so, the building, nothing has been happening in the sky layer. So I'll set this point right here, and now in order to commit, I can simply navigate and click on this develop button right here in order to commit our adjustment, which has been only applied to this layer but not the sky layer. So this is how you can non-destructively edit any raw images inside of Affinity. So if you find this video helpful, please click on the like button, and for more tips and tricks related to Affinity, hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching this video, and see you on the next video.